Welcome to class one or season one, class one, rocks and water, the power of brushwork. And we are going to be doing a quick demo on panel. Here's what I have, but canvas would work great. And I'm going to be using palette knife, which is kind of a reach for me as far as a tool that I almost never use. I told a story earlier in the class where that painting on the very far left that you can see of the rocks in the water, that was a plein air painting that I did under duress because I was literally getting hit by waves of water. And I couldn't get the paint to stick. And so I picked up a palette knife and I was able to just kind of slather it on there. And I absolutely adore the painting. And it's one I've wanted to revisit and to reuse. So I'm going to be jumping up there and showing you kind of how I would combine a palette knife and a brush and build this painting up, hopefully quickly, since this class is over in 13 minutes in a normal world. It's gonna be a very fast painting. Otherwise, we'll keep it going. And next week, I will come back and we are going to really be kind of breaking down the different elements of what makes a rock, what makes water, water. We've got so many facets to talk about, like just within water alone, you know, with reflections, with depth, with transparency, with moving water versus still water, and then rocks and all this stuff. So it's going to be a ton of fun. There's going to be a lot to cover. And yeah, I will figure out a slightly more refined way of teaching it than I did this week, but I'm excited. I've been wanting to revisit this painting for, gosh, 7 years, I think it is now. And palette knife is something that scares me. So I guess this is me showing you that I'm constantly asking you guys to do things that are outside of your own comfort zone. I promise you, I have not painted a palette knife painting in 7 years. So here we go. All right, camera's okay. I just went back to the palette that I assumed I used, meaning the colors that I assume I used during that time, because this was part of a trip we took around the world. So I literally had to pack the supplies that I needed. And I was using the same split primary palette that I like, but with one change that I made over the years. So I've got a titanium white, which is pretty much my always go-to white. This white actually sat out overnight, so it's a little bit thicker, which I think might help. But I don't know, that's here or there. Here I've got a cadmium yellow. This isn't a light or a medium or anything. It literally just says cadmium yellow. So I kind of think it's right in there. It's probably a little warmer than a cadmium lemon that I would normally use. It's also by a different brand than I normally use. It's called Georgian. Next to that, I've got, actually I should squeeze it out and make sure. This might be the cadmium yellow. Okay, so sorry. This is the cadmium yellow. This is a Hansa yellow light. So that'd be more like a cadmium lemon or cadmium yellow light. This is a cadmium red light. Quinacridone red. Ultramarine blue. And a manganese blue. So this, roughly, the yellows are, I change a lot, but these other colors are fairly consistent, especially my blues, and have been for years and years. But I do experiment with my colors a lot lately. But I do suggest to newer painters that you kind of pick a somewhat limited palette and stick with it. Get to know those colors a little bit so that you're kind of comfortable with them. And then you can begin to experiment a little better. What I wanted to do here is 3 of these actually, these two colors are fairly opaque, meaning they have really good coverage, which is going to work better with a palette knife where I kind of want to lay the colors on top. I took off Indian yellow, which is one of my very favorite colors, because it's so transparent that I thought with a palette knife, it would just, it wouldn't do a lot of the things that I want to do. So I think, and I'm kind of a little bit guessing here, that when doing palette knife, when I look at other people's work who are really thick and dense with the palette knife, that they're using more opaque colors. And you can find out that information by simply flipping your paints over and looking on the back. We'll have a little opaque, semi-opaque, semi-transparent, or transparent. This ultramarine is actually a transparent, which normally is a semi-transparent, but there we go. I have my reference way over here, which is not quite fitting in the scene. This is the plein air painting I did while traveling. And so to get it all on screen, I either can move the camera back a little bit. There we go. Does that work pretty well? So you can see the reference, the palette, and the painting?
Yeah.
All right, great.
Good.
You are. Michael, you're jumping in and out of, you're not on the focus anymore. Other people.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Let me go do that. There we go. Is that better?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Thank you for that reminder. Which also gives me a chance to grab my water. All right, so I'm going to start with my big shapes. So in design, in the first stage, well, yeah, in the first stage, basically what I'm looking for is kind of what's the main thing in this, right? Nobody would want to buy this painting, but those are kind of the key ingredients that are telling me this story, kind of the architecture of the painting, right? I just kind of knocked in the darks, and I'm going to build up my lights with oils and acrylics, the opposite of watercolor. I want to generally paint from dark to light. It really makes the painting process, again, generally a lot easier for people. So for those of you who are writing notes, dark to light is really important. It is almost always easier to lighten a painting as you're building it up than it is to darken it. There's times where I'll come back in and add dark elements, but as a general rule, dark to light. The other thing I want to do often is thin to thick, meaning thinner paint, which is what I'm going to do right now. I'm just going to kind of do stage 2. So this is kind of design, but thought of almost like a black and white, very basic shapes, big shapes. And then I'm going to think thin to thick. So a lot of times with the thin stage of the painting is where I would kind of block in my colors. I would kind of think, you know, what are some of the big color areas? I'm thinking very much two-dimensionally. I'm not trying to create the idea of form and structure too much. So I added a tiny bit of paint thinner to this paint here, just so it goes on a little bit lighter. Oh, it looks like a lot of paint thinner. And I'm just going to kind of knock in some big areas of color here.
Michael, when you are painting in this position, it throws a glare on the painting and it like washes it out for me. I don't know if it's happening for anybody else.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
arm getting in there.
Not about your arm. I think it's the light overhead.
Yeah, it's the light.
See if I turn that off.
Ah,
there.
that's better.
Much better. Better.
So what I'm looking for is just kind of blocking in big areas of color. And I'm just thinking very much abstractly. I'm not thinking things at this point. It's just values.
And that's a chip brush you're using?
Yeah, I'm just knocking in. It's a pretty big canvas. I think this is probably like 18 by 24. So it's a pretty good size. So I'm just going to try to cover areas pretty quickly. Gonna get some color in that sky. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring a little white into it, which I kind of avoid a lot of times in the beginning, but I know that my sky is just not that bright. So I'm kind of mixing in a whole bunch of the colors. Thinking it's a little pinker.
Do you paint the first layer like very chromatic, Michael? Or are you going to like mute that later or something?
I'm not sure I quite understood the question.
I mean, so for example, the blue, I think it is directly out of tube, right? It's not muted.
Yeah,
Anything.
that much. Yeah, again with the light to dark, and this layer is kind of transparent. You can kind of see the light getting in and bouncing back a little bit, and then I'll be able to come back in and I put a little too much paint thinner, so I'm just kind of knocking that down a little bit so it's not too slippery. If I needed to, I could just wait for that to kind of evaporate, but we don't have that time now. But yeah, in the sky, I went ahead and added some white, and I'm just going to try to get the sky a little quicker. But yeah, a lot of times when I'm kind of blocking in and just kind of laying in big areas of color, I can really just go with real high chroma, again, with the idea that I'll be able to lighten it.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
But sometimes it's fun to kind of come in thick and almost think sculpturally with the paint. So there's multiple ways you can approach it. But again, when I generally, you can hear that scratching noise.
Yeah.
So that helps. If I'm not adding paint thinner, I can actually thin the paint by just putting it literally on thinner. And I'm just trying to create a sense of light and color in the sky that I'm going to be using in the rest of this picture to tell me the influence of what's kind of going on there, because the sky is the source of light, and the light is coming from my left side across. So I know that the left side of my sky is probably a little warmer, a little lighter than the right side of it. So I'm almost using this like a note, but at the same time, maybe I'll get lucky and kind of knock in some nice forms and nice colors. Let's see. Let's get a little bit of cooler blue on the right side of that sky, just so we can see a transition from this, what I'm conceiving to be the light source kind of over here, probably off the scene a little bit. Like the sun's probably right about here, kind of coming across. So just by simply having what I hope you guys can see, a little bit cooler to warmer, kind of hinting maybe at a little bit of clouds up there. And with the full knowledge, I'll be able to come back in and refine this. Again, I'm just kind of trying to block out my big areas. So what I've got here is more like the water. And then these areas that I haven't touched are going to be more affected by the foam, or the whitewash of the water hitting those rocks. I'm also thinking, as I'm looking up, that there's a little bit of warmth from the sun as we get towards the horizon a little bit. So maybe it gets a touch more purple, a touch more of those reds up there. But again, this side should be warmer than this side, so I can bring back in a little more blue over there. And this is just big colors. I'll be able to come in and add all the detail, everything else. This is like my blueprint on my map for the painting as I'm going forward. And the good thing is sometimes I get to let some of this stay in the painting, and I'll get this kind of glowy underpaint showing that's fairly transparent, fairly thin.
Michael, did you say, could you repeat again why it's warmer to the left than to the right?
My sun is over here.
Okay, okay,
Almost think of the yellow here as kind of my sun.
all right.
So I want
Gotcha.
to know, and yeah, I guess I can ask you guys that. What are my first two questions I ask when I'm painting a landscape?
Where's the light?
Where's the light?
Where's the light? What's the second one?
Horizon line.
There's the horizon line, right? So we put it in. It's pretty obvious.
I have a question about that I struggle with is when you put the horizon line in, sometimes I feel like I have to put a ruler there and paint with the ruler still in place so that I don't smear it too much or go off. How do you correct or mitigate when you want a real specific edge on the horizon line?
Yeah, there's times I'll use literally tape, put it across and paint that if I will really have a clean definition, or yeah, I use my T-square rulers all the time. The T-square is great because, you know, with the tape, I could still put it on, but with the T-square, you know, look at that, pretty good job. That's darn flat. So yeah, I use whatever it takes, whatever makes me most comfortable. So sometimes, yeah, I can take my T-square, draw a line or whatever, mark a line, and then take some painter's tape. And especially on big, you know, like 48-inch wide paintings and stuff, it's pretty important that my horizon line's not a little bit off, because it will literally ruin the painting. It'll make it feel awkward for everybody looking at it. So I'm just trying to kind of knock in some big areas here. I'm going to go ahead and lighten some blue and get some kind of a gray, meaning I'll mix all my colors a little bit to gray this down. It's leaning towards blue, so it means there'll probably be more blue in it. I'm just going to kind of hopefully quickly knock in kind of where the foam is. And again, I'm still thinking, even though foam can be very, very light, I'm still thinking thin to thick and dark to light. So I'm thinking, what's the kind of darker areas of this foam? And I don't need to be painting with this big of a brush. You can see I'm brushing over big areas. But I do want to get it covered quickly because this class is already gone long. So a lot of times you guys can still hear that scrubbing noise. A lot of the times my beginning of my painting is really scrubby. Whew, that is one ugly painting, folks. What is he doing?
I can totally see where it's going though, Michael.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's just it. I have to constantly be getting out of my head of like, trust the process, trust the process, trust the process. It is, painting is so much more difficult when we want or if we're embarrassed that somebody's going to see the painting at all of its different stages. Just with that full knowledge, it has to go through so many awkward phases to get to where we want it. You could paint it beautifully and detailed the whole time, but it'll take you so much longer, and your odds of having a harmonious piece, if you're just painting with a little brush the whole time, are so much less. But if I can just kind of get in here, block out, give myself a roadmap, give myself my blueprint, kind of figure out where things are, where they exist in space, a little bit of what are their relationships with each other, then it is a lot better. Gonna take all these colors and give myself some mixing area. I can save them. It'll probably make some interesting grays down here. I'm gonna guess very blue grays. Yeah, that's nice. Almost exactly the same color as the palette. So I'm constantly kind of cleaning up a mixing area. I find with so many, new painters that they'll cover their palette and then all of a sudden they're trying to mix colors in this little tiny remaining space. So you can pick up your colors. You'll oftentimes end up with beautiful grays. If I had a whole bunch of warm colors and a whole bunch of cool colors on my palette and I was cleaning it up, I would just make a warm color palette of grays and a cool, because it's really easy to modify and use those colors. And oftentimes you'll get some of your most harmonized colors in these grays that you can use throughout the painting because it's already relating so nicely to all the colors you have on there. All right, so I want to kind of think dark to light. I'm going to go ahead and using some of the palette knife a little bit. So I'm going to take my ultramarine blue, and we'll talk about this more in other classes. But to make a real dark, I'm gonna, and I don't have a black on the palette, I'm just going to mix my ultramarine blue, some of my cadmium red light, which seems weird. And it makes, this is a very warm because that cadmium is such a strong color. But I might be able to use some of that. I can pull some of that aside, add more ultramarine to it, cool that down, meaning get it to go a little more towards blue. And then I'm going to grab a touch of my cadmium yellow and mix that in. And that will right now it's turned kind of greenish. We'll neutralize that maroon, really dark maroon I just made, and make a really nice dark color. The great thing about this is it's none of these three colors I just made are black. They all lean one direction or another, and they all have a little bit of life in them. Because they're not just black. So I'm gonna try to keep my paints pretty thin. I'm gonna come through and I'm just gonna kind of think about what is the structure that I want in these rocks. You know, where's the tallest rocks? Where's the shorter rocks? Who has bigger shadow areas? I'll go ahead and kind of move from the bottom up a little bit because I know that my darkest darks are probably going to be kind of coming towards me, and that the darks in the shadows will get a little lighter as they go away from me in space. They're also going to get a little bit probably cooler. And then I know that there's this atmosphere, there's some, you know, mist being kicked in by the water and everything else. So I'm gonna go with my warmer, darkest darks. And I'm gonna, even though I'm painting with a palette knife here, I'm gonna probably try to keep it kind of on the thinner side. So you'll hear a little more scraping. And I'm gonna be thinking a little bit about the edge quality and kind of, I don't know if you guys can see, oh, you'll be able to see it, great. Kind of like, what is the form? So basically I'm putting in the darkest darks in these rocks. You can already see that, right? Like that little bit of
Yep.
separation.
Do you mix any like paint thickener or thicker, like oleopasto or something in your Newtons? That probably like.
You definitely could. I don't find with palette knives that it works as well having a medium because it'll be, you know, it's making the paint even softer. I'm kind of doing this purposely to kind of get the texture. And I also want that kind of like frosting, like thickness, but probably not as much at this stage. And truthfully, I could be doing these darks probably much easier, and maybe I should as I draw them out with a brush, because I want most of my texture that's going to show itself to be in the lights, in where the light is hitting the tops of these rocks.
And you're just kind of making up the shapes in your mind.
A little bit. They're loosely based on the reference. They're, you know, they're just a bunch of rocks. So I don't have to be too specific, but I want them to have a logic to them. Like, you know, this rock, if I have two rocks over here, this rock's probably a little lower than this rock, and this rock's a little lower than this rock. So you can kind of see that, how they're laying down a little bit.
Kind of like a hierarchy almost.
It is a bit like a hierarchy, and I'm just, you know, you're using, I know that where the rocks meet and they're kind of in their deepest crevices between them is where my darks are probably, again, depending on the angle. If the light's coming from there, I'm constantly thinking, so the tops of these rocks are where the light and the color is going to reveal itself. We need light to have color, right? We need light to reveal the form.
Yeah.
So what can I do?
So you're kind of putting in the darker crevices first.
I am, because I like to paint dark to light.
Mhm.
And this will help me to kind of find the form, right? You can already hopefully begin to see the idea of some rocks kind of appearing and a little bit of a separation. And yeah, I have my reference, but I don't need to adhere to it. So I can almost say, well, that kind of looks like that could be a nice rock. You know, what if I revealed that a little more? You know, and I want them to be different. I don't want just lumps. Right? I want them to each have a little bit of personality. A little bit of something to say. And figuring out, you know, how much of the rock is kind of flat, being revealed to the light in full. How much darkness do I need to make the light feel special, right? Because that's really what this painting is about, is that light streaking across, catching on these wet stones, these wet rocks.
They're really looking like good rocks.
Yes,
Good.
they are.
Love rock.
Yeah, there's a lot of texture there. It's very interesting. Mm.
Ooh, that's warm. All right, squeeze out a little more ultramarine there. I used so much to make all those dark. Just got to reload. That's one of my strongest impulses, is to be lazy and to not reload my paints when it's so funny that I'll just try to get away with it, even though it takes 3 seconds to just reach over, grab the paint, squeeze it out. But I find that gets me in the most trouble, especially when I'm plein air painting, really kind of on a roll. Then all of a sudden I just don't reload colors properly.
I love how many different darks you have made. It's just not one dark, but like, yeah, different dark, different values, different shades.
Exactly. And then you're also going to be thinking about temperature. So if my light's coming from here, it might be reflecting off that rock underneath this rock. So that light's probably going to be warmer than the light in the middle. So there's a slightly more red hint to where I think of as light. So I'm actually thinking of the geometric structure of these rocks to a degree. I can always come back in and adjust those and refine them as I figure out where these rocks are. So I've got this rock pile kind of laid in. I can always come back in and add more information, but did you see how it's just a big brown blob? And now you can almost begin to imply some structure to it.
It's beautiful.
It's just like the blueprint for me. You know, nobody's going to walk by me if I'm out plein air painting at this moment and said, sold, you know, put it in my truck. I'm ready to go. It's an ugly painting, but it's on its way. And I just like it to materialize as I go through the different steps. So I'm still kind of in the block-in stage, or kind of, I could even theoretically still be somewhat in the drawing stage of getting this in, because it's a lot of values. Now I'm going to jump back to these rocks. So you see the darks in here, which are, you know, kind of nice, but really, really quite dark. This is kind of a slightly misty morning. So I'm going to cool my shadows down, add more blue to them, and maybe even grab a little bit of that gray. That's way too cold. If I put that in there, right? That's way, can you see that? Or is it too
Yeah,
blue?
too blue.
Too blue. It's kind of cool color. But I'm just going to mix in some of these other darks. But I want it to be slightly cooler, slightly lighter, probably, than these rocks. So let me wipe that back down so it's not so distracting. And I'm going to come back in and do just like I did there, a little bit of getting my shadows in. But I do know that they're cooler. They're a little lighter.
And that's because they're at a distance.
there's a distance, and then there's quite a bit of, again, these waves are kind of, they're not big, huge waves, but they're still kicking up a sense of atmosphere. It's early in the morning. It's
Okay,
so there's just, I'm trying to capture some of that feeling of atmosphere and mist that might be in the air. And this will also help to tell me, like, this is my darkest darks back here. And so I know that, it's a big jump. I could bring some of these shadows into maybe ones as they lean back.
I really struggle sometimes with distance. Like I know it needs to be cooler and lighter, but like how much cooler, how much lighter? Sometimes it's just like too light, sometimes too dark. Do you have any tips for that? It's like
I think it's going darker than lighter. I feel like maybe I'm going too light here, but what's difficult is where I want my lights to be here a little bit, are now the darkest thing. I know that I'm going to come in with lights across the tops of these. So I'm getting, it's like melting my brain a little bit. But I do suggest probably leaning towards a little on the darker side again, because it's really easy and fast to come in and lighten a little bit. You can do that with scumbling, which means kind of dry brushing if the painting's dry, or by glazing in. It's pretty easy to darken areas, but you can also lighten areas. So, a lot of times you just don't know until you've gotten coverage, right? And that's why I say, the first stage is design, second stage is drawing, getting it onto the canvas. The third stage is blocking in. And right now I'm blocking in because I don't know until I've got the painting covered.
Right, okay.
And one of the challenges I have is like you blocked in that bottom pile of rocks on the left is, ooh, that looks good. So I'll just finish that pile of rocks without doing any more blocking in.
No, I
get carried away.
Do it, but I strongly suggest kind of getting coverage, because again, like strong whites, this kind of works because it's going to be bright white foam, or bright lit foam. But oftentimes having some bright spots on your canvas that aren't covered really make it hard for us to read our relationships, our values, and how they're relating to each other.
Right. And then you get lost.
You get lost, and you're tricking yourself. It's misreading, because every color changes by what color's next to it. Every value changes by what's next to it. And when we're painting, if I was painting this rock, I'm only focusing right here.
Right.
But the trick is when we step back, this actually relates to all of this. So there's a lot of easy traps that we fall into as painters so often. And that's why, holding my brush from the end, stepping back. I don't know if you guys know this. Well, I know some of you know this, but I actually have my palette between me and the canvas, so I can't get too close unless I want a whole bunch of paint on my belly.
That's fun.
That I don't hold my brush like this. I mean, maybe sometimes for ultra detail, but very rarely. I'm almost always holding it back. I almost always paint better when I'm holding my brush from the end. I'm sitting back, holding it like a wand or like a conductor, and I can see the whole surface at the whole time. I have a lot of students that paint and sit down at the same time for various reasons, but some just do it because that's what they've done. I cannot hardly paint and sit down at the same time. I almost have to stand up, and what that allows me to do is just to literally either just lean my head back and see it, or take a step or two back really quickly. Being able to get some distance really quickly. And when I write down these steps of making a painting for you guys, I'll put in, take a break, take a step back. I'll have those ready for you in the next class of like, just little reminders of like, okay, you know, first step, design, let's figure this painting out. What's the crop, you know, what's important, what's not important. And I'm gonna just go ahead and start, we're gonna jump ahead and we're gonna start bringing some texture and some color into these rocks. And then what I think I will do is either work on this tomorrow during the group painting or just see, but I want to get to the part that's the interesting part, and that's literally the palette knife. So,
Michael, can you just tell me what this rock on the right, is that an upright rock?
yeah, that's how I envisioned it, but I already see that it's not reading quite like that. So I'm hoping that by having light along the rim is going to help. Otherwise, I may have to light it down. But yeah, that's what's in there. But I'm wondering if I should bring it in. In theory, I could get rid of it.
I'm not sure the top would be quite that flat.
It looks like a head and a person standing there just at the moment.
Yet. It does.
It looks like Linda enjoying the breeze.
All right, let's make some brown. So I just mixed red, yellow, blue. Now let's see if we can fix Senior Rock over here.
Sorry.
I'm gone. Away with me, Michael.
What's that?
Did away with me standing on the rock. It was a struggle to get up there, you know.
Sorry.
Okay.
We'll see if I can get away with that. So bring some light.
Is it like a viewpoint that you would stand up there?
I wasn't thinking it was that tall, but
It doesn't look that level to me.
No,
I've made it more of
No,
an
it definitely is not a level rock. I wouldn't be standing up there.
Linda's crazy.
Yes, she is. She's an
Yeah.
animal.
I actually crawled on rocks on the Oregon coast that I really had a struggle to get down from.
Oh yeah, people get stuck on those wet, slimy rocks all the time.
Oh, you don't think about all of that while you go in.
Hopefully you have a bungee cord wrapped around you.
I did not. I had shorts on and I was afraid if I tumbled down, I would have skint knees for sure.
All the bacteria that is in all those algae and everything.
That's what I thought about.
Or end up on your local news?
Yeah, had to call in the helicopter for another Arizona resident.
I'm telling you, that's awful.
That's what I was thinking.
All right, so I'm going to ignore this rock because I want to deal with down here just to kind of get some texture. Use this palette knife and just play with that. So I'm just going to mix some brown. I took some red here. I'm going to mix quite a bit of yellow into there. It's going to make kind of an orange. And then to make this into a brown, I'm just going to simply I can probably grab either one of the blues. This one will make it a little more greenish. This one's a little more reddish. I'm just going to kind of try to make kind of a light burnt umber. So take some of that and darken it down. Beautiful. And I'm just gonna add a little bit of this to this pile of lights that I happen to have from cleaning my palette earlier. There's a bit of harmony. So now we've got a light, medium, dark, kind of this. I'm gonna start with the darks, and I'm gonna build up kind of the side that's not maybe in the crevice, but it's not necessarily facing the light. So it's in the shadow, but it's not like stuck down deep in the shadow. So I'm just gonna kind of figure out my structure again. I'm just thinking again, fairly geometrically, like which way are, what sides maybe are facing light, which ways are facing away from light. And I'll be able to come through and again, modify this. Right now, again, I'm kind of racing the clock a little bit here, but I want to see if I can get
Michael,
the rock covered pretty quickly. Yeah.
will you turn your knife around sometimes so we can see how much is on it?
Oh, sure. Quite a lot.
Okay,
Mm.
all right.
Is the edge closest to you to
Yeah,
apply?
so a lot of beginners will paint with this inside side of the knife, but you're really fighting it.
Yeah,
People want to clean their palette with that side, but actually the other side, if you got a good flex to it, is your better side. And I'm just using the most generic palette knife. I actually have a stupid collection of them for somebody that doesn't use palette knives very often. That's not even all of them. All sorts. A lot of times they come in packs. One of my friends convinced me to buy this one, which I don't think I've ever used. But she paints really beautiful paintings with them. I've got, triangle shaped ones, or diamond shaped ones. This is more the, I always think of this as the kind of generic one and the one I use most for cleaning my palette and everything else. Yeah, and it just, you can put it on as thick as I want. But I'm still thinking thin to thick for a lot of it. So I still don't want my shadows probably being too dark. But what I really like is it just makes nice, you just end it and it's a nice sharp line, as sharp as I want. I can come back in with my brush later if I have areas that I'm just like, that's too crisp of a line, which on a rock, you can get away with really, in fact, you probably want really strong, crisp lines. I love the swirling too. I don't think you can see it, but when I mixed this brown, I didn't really over mix it. And so there's this kind of swirling of colors within there. And as long as I don't, start really smashing this and really scrubbing it in, I'll have these kind of striations of color and value within there, but they're still harmonized because they're close to each other. So you get this optical mixing, which somebody mentioned at the beginning of the class. So there's just these kind of, I don't know if happy accidents, because it's kind of planned, kind of thought out, but I don't have complete control for sure over it. And you're kind of inviting more of that. What I don't like about palette knife paintings, again, is when people just keep making the same mark. I don't like that in, paintings with brushes either, is just the same mark, the same motion, the same movement over and over is so boring. And you're just missing so much of what a brush, or in this case, a palette knife, is capable of. Is sometimes I'm just letting the paint sit right on the edge. Sometimes I'm squishing it down into the crevices. Sometimes I'm mixing it with that dark that I put down there a little bit, blending it. And I can create this kind of gradation and values and shifts. And other times I'm just letting it sit right on top, like frosting. Let's go to our next value so we can begin to actually see what's going on these rocks here. In my reference, they're really white and kind of light because they were black rocks. I'm going to actually make these rocks a little more brownish and hopefully a little more interesting, and also a little more non-volcanic. So I'm kind of hybridizing this between rocks I know, rocks I've seen, rocks I wish they were. But it's funny with black rocks, when they get wet, they're like a mirror to the sky. They're just so reflective. That's very warm, very light. So I'm gonna throw a tiny bit of green into that and neutralize that down a little bit. So because that was a reddish brown, by throwing in a little of this pale green, it should just kind of gray it down a little bit. Let's see. Again, I'm thinking, where's the light coming from? It's raking across the tops of these. That means the top edge is picking up a little more, but I do know that I'm even going to bring in one lighter value than this to where the highlights are hitting the rocks. So this is just kind of the top that's maybe facing towards the sky a little more. And please don't misunderstand that I want you to paint rocks with palette knives, but palette knives are a great tool for making harder, crisper, cleaner edges. So they do lend themselves to rocks more than clouds, even though lots and lots of painters do use palette knives for clouds. I just think those clouds generally look off unless they've come back in with a brush or something, their finger, whatever it is, to kind of soften those edges. Becoming very spotty. I'm realizing that I've got, light, dark, light, dark, light, dark. So
Yep.
With that knowledge, I'll come back in and see where I can link up likes and likes, or at least soften those transitions. Just because I personally find, when things are too spotty, it just feels too busy and unnecessary. So I'm constantly thinking, where can I bind likes? Where can I bind light darks? Where can I bind light lights? Where can I bind light mediums? Same with my values and my colors and my temperatures. But right now I am thinking just, okay, where's the light hitting? And then I will come through and modify that where it is necessary. I want this backside to be a little darker. So I can just come back in with some darker paint, neutralize that. Let's bring our lights in, and then we'll begin to play and sculpt.
So for the distant rocks, we would just make lighter versions of those three values.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I'll have to see. I mean, it'll probably be affected by the light, and I'm not sure I even like these colors really, truthfully, but I just kind of want to get it covered, just because I want to show you guys this technique. So I'm hoping you'll give me a little leaning as far as it being a actually really beautiful painting, but just showing kind of the idea of it. And seeing, let's just see at the end if they feel rock-like. They feel like they have a strength and a structure, a permanence.
And your paint is always on the top side of your knife. The way you're, like when you hold your knife in front of your painting, there's a top and a bottom, yeah, on the back of it there. Yeah, right there. Do you put
if I
paint
put
on
it on
both
this-
sides, depending
No.
where you are?
I don't think this side has had a touch of paint on it yet.
Oh, no, not that side, the other side, that one. It's always on the left side when
Yeah,
you're,
I mean, I could easily load it the other way and then, but I'm thinking the top of the rock down. So
okay, okay,
I can create that edge, like, okay, so I'm gonna come in and add light up here. So that's the paint's on this edge.
okay.
I literally lay it where I want that lightest light, and then I can just kind of lift it away. Good question.
It's better.
And the cool thing is, you know, if worse comes to worse, all I'm doing is creating some interesting texture and giving myself a design. You know, I could come back next week when this painting's tacked up and I can come in and, you know, make all these rocks a color that maybe looks a little better, but I'll have this really interesting texture and form to kind of work with.
We sort of talked about that the other day when we talked about doing an underpainting with a lot of texture.
Yeah, with the acrylics. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's kind of what I've been doing with some of the acrylics, especially in the idea of waves and
So do you have to let it dry pretty good before you go back in with the white foam and splash?
I mean, yeah, or be careful. Yeah, definitely. That will be, yeah, I wouldn't have done this first before doing all the water and everything. If this class literally, if the whole thing wasn't about me showing this to you, I would have done a lot of that foam and stuff. And I could probably still get away with a lot of it, but yeah, there's a good chance I'm gonna bump up and all of a sudden have a bunch of brown paint and dark paint, you know, that's, you know, getting into the white foam. So yeah, this wasn't the best way to do this, but I'm hoping that that looks hard and rock-like and structural and you know, I can still come through with a brush and let's say, you know what, I want a little cleaner transition. I can just knock that right back out. I can, you know, I could come back in and draw lines in. So that's the cool thing with a palette knife. It's not one or the other. You know, I could load it on so thick, you know, I could literally grab a whole pile of paint and just, you know, well, I don't know if you can see the shadow being cast by that. Yep. You know, I can lay it on as thick as I want. I can do so much with it, but one of the better things is I can, now that I've got some decent amount of paint on here, I don't even have any paint on this. I've cleaned it off. I can go into there and move that around. Again, kind of like frosting on a cake. It's sculptable in a way. It's also removable. And I can scrape that back off so that I can reapply it.
What's nice about that is you're automatically getting that little bit shadow tone.
Yeah, exactly. You get these kind of mids and so let's put light down there. Okay, it could happen, but most likely this rock's pushing a shadow, but I still want it to feel like it's getting light. So I put that light, I've already got 2 layers on there. I'm just gonna very lightly push that in. So I can even do blending with a palette knife and get those mids, or I can get some reflected light in there.
Do you have any opinion on maybe using quick dry white, especially if you wanted to get to glazing quicker?
Yeah, if you're wanting to glaze, so with a lot of texture, glazing is definitely trickier because of all the crevices and everything. Yeah, quick dry white, or you could add some medium to it. Or use acrylic underneath, you know, do your first layer with acrylics and some kind of a gel or a heavy bodied acrylic. And so, yeah, there's lots of different ways to build up. Oils are the toughest because if you want a lot of texture, that means you're putting the paint on thick, which means the paint is going to dry fairly slowly. I should have probably put out a fast dry white. That would have probably been smart. So yeah, that would be probably something I would definitely contemplate doing, or maybe I'll contemplate doing in some of this. Does this make sense? And then if I have a lot of texture up front, these rocks, I don't even paint them with the palette knife. Maybe I paint them with my brush, because I want them to fall back in space optically, and you know, both using atmospheric perspective and a touch of linear perspective, just meaning they're smaller, they're receding into space. So maybe I do the same thing there, but this time with my brush, so there isn't as much texture.
If there was a place you needed a tiny bit of texture, you can always take your knife and go over that same spot.
100%, yeah, absolutely. But just because I'm using my knife on one section doesn't mean I need to use it throughout, right? So just strategic, and just, you know, a palette knife again is not the only way to create texture. I could literally load the brush up really heavy. Put a lot of paint on there, and you know, get a good glob of paint, and I can do a lot of texture that way too. So I don't know if you can see that again with the glare as it is.
I can see it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's texture, just less than here. So anyways, I was just kind of excited about, you know, exploring these ideas of different ways of creating a sense of depth. Also just kind of different mark making. I've been so into transparent paint for a while, and really exploring thin and transparent layers, that it's fun for me to kind of, okay, now what? Let's go the complete opposite. Let's go opaque and very thick, and see what happens. And so just the palette knife, and that reminded me of this painting from Spain that I did, and the crazy adventure of being freezing cold and having a sopping wet palette and canvas, and having to resort to my palette knife, and then having such a good time with that.
Did the water on your canvas affect how it dries or how it sticks?
The water on my
Ocean
Well, you said
spray.
your canvas was wet.
Ocean
Okay.
spray she made.
stick to you just got to put a lot of paint on there and kind of
Yeah.
push it a little bit. Yeah, it's the crazy
I
thing.
just wondered if it maybe didn't adhere properly.
Plus it's salt water.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's here 7-8 years later. No, I've painted multiple times in like absolute rainstorms. One time I was painting at the Oregon coast, and this crazy, I mean, absolute torrential rainstorm came in, and I was with two friends, and we were all looking at each other like, I'm not going to be the first one to go in and call it. And so we all stayed out there, got soaking wet. It was raining so hard that it filled up the box that my plein air kit is.
Oh my God.
So I was having to dip into about an inch or two of water to get to the paint, and it still worked. But you really had to kind of mash it on there. It was such a crazy thing. Wish we had a video of that, except for I guess the camera would have been all wet.
Sounds like fun.
It was super fun. Yeah, we were laughing and laughing and literally just yeah, it's funny. Like, yeah, there's so many challenges already to painting. That wasn't another one we needed, but it was, you know, sure memorable. Okay, so there was the lesson in a nutshell. It only took me 1 hour extra from class. Yeah,
Being beautiful.
yeah, you can see that again. Compare that to like soft and atmospheric, you know, really light clouds. Let's put a cloud next to it. All right, so we've got a cloud here. Right now it's just a silly white puff of a cloud. Right, and it doesn't feel that different because I've left the brush strokes. I'm sorry, I ran out of paper towels, so I'm trying to find something to remove some of the paint from the brush. But with a cloud, you can see that edge here, that sharper edge. With a cloud, it's going to feel much more cloud-like.
You don't mean cloud, do you?
I do.
You're painting a cloud in the water.
Yeah.
For demonstration purposes.
It'll be foam eventually, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But I was thinking a cloud. Like, what's the biggest difference in the landscape is between generally
Okay.
Right.
a rock and a cloud is the biggest difference. So,
Totally get it.
huh?
I totally get that. Thank you. That's
Michael,
very
can you,
interesting.
Over here so we can see it a little better.
Michael, can you see the lion's face in that rock where you were working just now? But yeah. Yeah. Then the eye,
Or a sea lion, maybe.
or a
Yeah.
sea lion, yeah.
Yes.
I see it.
Keep it. Don't paint it away.
All right, I'll name it Seal Rock.
There's lots of sea lions out there, so that's wonderful.
This is their statue. So anyways, there's a like little soft cloud, but to make that cloud feel more cloud-like, you know, this is what we talked about in the last class.
Michael, I have a quick question. How are you moving only the paint like effortlessly? Is it like specific paint? Because without paint thinner, I can't just move just paint around the canvas. How you're doing it?
So you can't move your paint because all I have to do is just move it. There's no paint thinner in that. No, I just push it around.
Just a light touch, I think he is how he's doing it.
Yeah, so like if I want this cloud, let's just say, you know, you see how it goes out and it gets thinner. If I just want it to get thinner and thinner and thinner, I just
And a little bit of the blues mixing in, right?
slowly, yeah. But by having a light touch, I don't blend until I come in with a heavy hand, and then I can get those colors behind it to mix in.
But there's a difference, in my opinion, of painting on canvas and painting on a board. You have a little more freedom, I think, with a board than you would have with the canvas.
Yeah,
I agree.
That's
I
my
agree.
I do not like paint canvases hardly ever.
I'm
Yeah.
not crazy about it either.
Like the next paintings I'm doing are all on canvas. I will gesso them multiple times to get as little texture on there as possible.
Well, and I use linen, which is a little smoother.
Yeah, linen, and it's got a more irregular weave, so you don't
Yeah.
get that weird computerized look in the thin areas, the kind of whatever that's called. All right. Cool. I'm gonna leave it there. I know I didn't finish a painting, barely even started a painting, but I hopefully you can kind of get an idea. I'm not even happy with this crazy color, brown and stuff. But I do know that it can come down with my brush, you know, after this is dry a little bit. You know, and I do feel a bit of a sense of light. I've got some stripes going on, and a lot of things, if I step back or was taking a little more time, I could get rid of, or I can just simply, you know, take and merge. So this is one big rock versus having, you know, a bunch of little rocks. You know, this weird line here. So I'm always looking for, where can I merge things? Where can I make things irregular? I don't want to have just line. But we'll talk about all that in future classes. I appreciate you guys being patient with me. This was a little bit, I kind of felt like in the middle there, I got a little chaotic with trying to introduce too many ideas. Homework. Is anybody left?
Yeah, we're here.
Yeah,
We're still here.
sock it to us.
All
Pen
right.
in hand, ready to write.
All right. Well, I'm gonna save the palette knife for later. I think that I would prefer that we work a little bit on design and well, yeah, I think so. I think that we should lean in towards that design because that's kind of the first stage. And or maybe I should just not give you guys homework this week. Give you guys a week to kind of finish up projects. Linda and who else is here?
I'm here.
Are you still here? Yep.
I'm here. Maybe just have us do a notan or some design that we choose. That we
Right. Yeah. Let's go ahead and do some design work where you're working on editing and kind of figuring out something with rocks and water in it. I'll figure out a little bit prettier way to write that, and I'll send it out in an email to everybody.
Do we all have to do the same picture or just come up with a picture that we
No,
can?
you never have to do the same picture as me.
Okay.
Never, ever, ever. I just thought that one was interesting because it looks pretty when you first look at it, but it didn't work.
The green one or the,
No,
Great.
the one you're doing, I love that painting, Michael. It's a good painting.
Oh, I meant the reference, but the painting now too.
He's
green- the
talking
green
about
rep.
the toxic green one.
Oh, the toxic.
We just do whatever picture we want, as long as it's got rocks and water.
Rocks and water. And then we're gonna next week we'll start talking about the different types of water, still water, moving water, and the different types of reflections that might have. And then I will just ask that you experiment with different ways of making marks. So today, I hope your big takeaway was that a flat brush or a palette knife are your best tools for most parts of paintings for making hard edges. We want our rocks to have generally hard edges, especially in the foreground. And if you want to play with texture, a palette knife is a great tool. Phew.
Appreciate that. I'm really not a palette knife painter. I
I'm not
have
either, but
too
I
much
want to try.
paint going.
Maybe at the end we'll all be able to frost a cake at least. I can't even do that. Every time I go to frost a cake, the first layer of frosting comes up with the second layer. So I figure out that touch. So anyways,
Well, I've been automatically, mine absolutely wants to use both. That I have with every painting I've painted, including the gorge one, my final.
palette knife, really.
Yeah, and with palette knife and brushes, I like both.
Good. Yeah. Yeah.
So
'Cause
you're using, for the softer edges and farther away, you're using the brushes to get those soft, the beautiful atmospheric perspective.
well, why didn't you speak up earlier?
Because I was
When I-
embarrassed because nobody else was doing it and I felt like I was doing something wrong.
Yeah,
You're ahead of your time.
You were the worst student and now you're the best. So congratulations.
Yeah, right.
There you go.
If it looks good, it's not wrong.
Nope, that's awesome. All right, gang, I'm gonna go ahead and get out of here and go get some lunch and breakfast, I guess. And
I'm having wine.
okay, good.
Wine's
We'll
good.
be thinking about you, Cheryl. And
It's time. It's 4:30. It's time.
perfect. Now,
Wine 30.
3:30 here, it's getting close.
all right. So I
Okay,
will send out a quick note about homework for this week is kind of figure out the design of a picture. You have all those references that are on the website or on the Padlet. If you'd like to use any, feel free to use your own. If you would like to do a copy of another person's painting, great. But just don't sell it. And sorry again. I will stop apologizing after this last one, but Yeah, I thought I had such an interesting idea, and then again, just second guessing myself at the last minute this morning, going, "That's too advanced. What am I doing?" Taught him how to start a painting.
Well,
It went well. Yeah.
I always learn something.
It's all up from here.
Woohoo.
All right, you guys, thank you so
And
much
see you
for your
tomorrow.
time.
thank you.
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Tomorrow.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks.